Hello, thanks again for watching the series. Today we're going to cover one of the sectors that's probably the most affected by this crisis, which is aviation. Because we have a lot of information to cover, I'm not bringing one, but actually two of the specialists in the sector. The first is Mario Arbery. He's an aeronautical engineer with a master's in air transport management. His background experience is working in route planning in companies like easyJet, Virgin Atlantic, and British Airways. The second is Thiago Cazarine. He's an electrical engineer, graduated in Unicamp. He worked in technological and innovative markets. Currently, he's working in a marketing and sales department in a large air manufacturing company. So I'm going to remove you guys, then I'll bring you back once we are in the questions. Okay, so showing the basic information, first, once people were starting to move from lower income classes to middle income classes, as GDP per capita in the world increases, we actually saw more and more flights every year. So it increased in roughly 3% per year. As more flights were occurring in the world, we actually saw that the revenue of airlines, of course, was also increasing. So today it's 800 billion industry. This has been growing of 2% per year. And as more people are traveling, of course, we also see new airlines appear every year. So actually, an average of 43 new airlines appear every year in the industry, which is quite impressive. As more airlines are appearing and more people are flying, the occupation rate of the different routes are increasing. And so when we look at the companies that they produce the aircrafts, we actually see that they also have been growing considerably. So Boeing and Airbus are the biggest ones. They are selling around 800 aircrafts per year. And Embraer and Bombardier, they are smaller companies, selling from 50 to 100 aircrafts every year. This is actually a very interesting market because we don't have that many companies out there. Embraer and Bombardier, they have been decreasing a little bit in the last years. Airbus have been growing consistently 6% per year. And Boeing was growing until the 737 MAX crisis that they had last year, in which they sold just half of the quantity they were used to. So when we start looking at the market, it's actually not a very easy market. The average profit margin of this market is just 3.1%. Because of this, while a lot of companies are getting into the market, a lot of companies are actually also leaving the market. So every year, in an average 21 companies, they file for bankruptcy in this market. When you compare this number with 2008, which was a year of crisis, we actually saw a number 3 times larger than this. So in this year, we can expect that it's going to be similar or actually worse than that. Now, when we look at what happened in this epidemic, we actually saw that the number of trips decreased a lot. When you compare the blue line, which is this year, with the green line, which was last year, we actually saw that the number nowadays is less than 30% than it was in a year, in the last year, for example. And we also saw this in the stocks. So when you compare just the world airlines stocks with the general market, you can see that it was much more affected. As this happens, we can see that these companies, they don't have that much cash in their balance sheets. So when you look at how much time they would be able to stay in the market if they don't receive additional cash, it's actually some companies that can just stand for 1 or 3 months. Some companies are a little bit better, but still, they're going to have a hard time to go through this. Because of this, companies need to go to the market and actually ask for additional cash. So when we look just at Delta, United, and Singapore Airlines, they together, they're already committed with more than $10 billion in loans. And other companies are following suit. So in order to go through this, what companies are doing basically are 3 things. First, they are getting finance in order to increase cash and commit with urgent expenses, as you can see in the graph. Secondly, they're cutting costs and also reducing their journeys, mass dismissals, as you can see in the media all the time. And third, they're postponing every type of investment that they have planned before. So basically, that's it. Now I'm gonna bring my 2 friends back. And first, Mario, if you can help me with the first questions. What's your opinion? Will airlines be able to go through this crisis?
Thank you, Tulio. I think it's a good question. I think ultimately most airlines will survive, but this is, as you were saying, one of the worst crises for aviation because it combines both a pandemic with a future recession. And if you look at previous crises like the 1970s with the oil crisis, 9/11, and then the financial crisis, they had only one of the two elements, right? So this is surely going to be one of the worst crises, if not the worst. It's caused airlines to ground their entire fleet in the last few weeks, and as a result, they face a countdown in terms of cash. At best, they have cash at the end of the year, and at worst for the next month.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my opinion is, in most areas of the world, airlines are of strategic importance, so they will be bailed out on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
However, these bailouts will have strings attached. For example, a stake of the government in the airline, or obviously a commitment from the airline to reduce costs. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, only the fittest airlines will survive. And as a result, there will be fewer actors and more consolidation. So the airlines that do survive will benefit from reduced capacity in the market.
Okay, Thiago, what about the aircraft manufacturers and the whole supply chain involved?
Yeah, Tulio, as we have seen in the presentation, most of the airlines during this crisis with a really low demand, they have grounded the most of their fleet and postponed their investments on a new fleet, which includes receiving new aircraft, which impacts directly the aircraft manufacturers. Well, the aircraft manufacturers should cope with this right now, but I would say as soon as the demand keeps growing once again, the airlines might be interested once again in new aircraft. However, I'd like to bring up the attention to that most of the cost of a trip for the airline, 30% is related to the jet fuel. How much they spend with fuel. That really depends on on how the airlines will be searching for a new aircraft on the market and buying new aircraft, on how high or how low will be the oil price in the market. If it's low, it might be the possibility they look for the only pre-owned aircraft. It doesn't matter how much fuel they burn because the oil is down anyway. However, if it's high, then the look for new and efficient aircraft might be good enough for them to buy new aircraft as well. So that might be a chance for the aircraft manufacturers to recover themselves.
Okay, that's interesting. Mario, which additional actions do you believe that this, beyond the ones that were already mentioned, this company should be in order to survive?
Yeah, you mentioned a few in the presentation. I think beyond seeking additional loans and cutting costs and postponing investments, I think in the shorter term, they can reorient their resources. So, for example, we've seen in most countries, crew have actually gone out to help the health services, and the cargo flights have increased. Because cargo is one of the areas which is not as affected as passenger. So they can help out in the short term in that way. In the long term, as Thiago was saying, there's a possibility also to hedge fuel. Right now, fuel prices are lower than before. So some airlines have incurred hedging losses, but going forward, they could hedge at this lower fuel. Yeah. Also, switching their aircraft from owned to leased is a good way forward as well, and working with manufacturers to redesign aircraft to be more fuel efficient and therefore also help with their emissions, which, as we know, is one of the ongoing concerns for aviation.
For sure. Thiago, any additional comment on that?
I think it's a good opportunity for the airlines also rethink their whole fleet, on the size of their fleet, on the size of their aircraft, and on the efficiency of the aircraft, as Mario already mentioned. It's a good thing to work also with the aircraft manufacturer to define the better and how better developments on the future to address these efficiency points, both on seat capacity and both on fuel efficiency.
Yeah, as you mentioned that some of these companies, they will have to review a little bit the size of their fleets. What else, which other changes they will need to do internally, or what kind of departments are going to lose and gain importance doing this?
I'm going to talk a little bit more on the perspective of an aircraft manufacturer. We now know that the production lines and manufacturing lines they have shrunk. They will shrunk in the future, in the near future, regarding the postpone of the deliveries of the aircrafts. Much of them have shut down as well. However, a great departments that have relevance now are especially the ones related to HR and supply chain, because they have to resize and rethink everything about the companies, and not talking only about the aircraft manufacturers, but talking about every company right now going through this crisis. They have to do some jobs right now. However, things will start getting relevance as soon as the market will start recovering. It's hard to tell right now what will gain relevance, but I think strategical areas are the main goal, should be the main goal, and will gain much importance whenever things start getting back to normal once again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mario, most of people watching this video, they're also customers of this service. So what do you believe that we as customers should do differently in order to guarantee that the whole environment for the industry is healthy?
Sure. I think, as many of you know, right now, airlines are offering vouchers instead of refunding customers. Now, customers have the opportunity to use these vouchers. Ideally, they would use the vouchers rather than continue applying for refunds, mainly because airlines need the cash to survive, right?
Yeah,
and
correct.
if they go for this more short-term, I want my cash back, maybe they won't be able to fly on that airline full stop, right? So from that perspective, it's just trying to understand the airline's position. Now, once restrictions are loosened and people are able to travel, it would help airlines for people to actually travel. So specifically domestically, which will be one of the areas that will rebound more, if customers could continue using airlines as they were before, rather than, for example, opting to use a train or a car, that would help.
And Thiago, what advice would you give to someone who is looking for a job and is in at this point, which is probably not ideal, but there are some people with this goal?
An advice I can give to someone looking for a job right now at this point is, well, some job related to restructuring, maybe supply chain as well, because all the contracts need to be negotiated. So it's a good thing to be looking for, and companies are willing to hire people to help on this process.
Yeah, that's a very interesting advice. As you touched that, so what kind of changes should we expect in the airport dynamics after this crisis, Thiago?
A reminder that after the 9/11 events that happened, I think that really impacted the aircraft manufacturers as well, is that after this point, it was mandatory to have a door which was reinforced on the cockpit, was bulletproof and so on, and something that all the aircraft should incorporate to their aircraft, because it was a security matter. So it's something that really affected us. Mm-hmm. Right now, at this point, I'm not sure yet what would impact the aircraft with this after this crisis. But talking about airports itself, I think that something that's already happening is the change of the cleaning process in between flights. So after between one flight and another, using a cleaning spray and being sure that the aircraft is clean enough, it's something that's really important for the airlines right now. This impacts a lot on the cost and on the time between flights, and the cost the trip will have. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's something that might imply in higher taxes in the future, in higher fares in the future, because there's one more concern regarding the airport process. And so
yeah, the more things you add, for sure it gets more complex. Mario, do you have anything to add, especially from the point of view of airline?
Sure. So I think what we'll see is additional screenings in airports. So we saw after 9/11, there was additional security screenings with liquids and gun control, for example, metal detectors. So what I would see is temperature scanners to make sure that people who are traveling don't have coronavirus or any similar disease, right? That's more from the security side. Also, I think from the scheduling perspective, airports will have to be more understanding of slot regulations. So right now, airlines don't have to fly the slots they have because of the corona crisis. But after the corona crisis improves, they should also be more understanding of airlines not having to use all the slots they have because of this reduced demand.
Yeah, perfect. Guys, thank you very much for all of your questions. Definitely, this is not going to be, this year is not going to be easy for this industry, but for sure, it's going to be very interesting for us to understand how they're reacting to that and all of the changes they're going to perform. And probably in the end, it's going to be a better industry than it is nowadays. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.